even down to the modifications in the improvements in the implications, sorry, in the yields, in the crop yields. Again, problems with the remote, sorry. If you can simply go on to the next, I ask you to go in the other slides. So the next slide will be about the fact that in this fact sheet, the results of these studies are presented in several ways. For example, in this infographic, you can see that as results from these trials, you can see that the improvements in the benefits provided by the application of compost and digestate to soils change over the time. So applying organic fertilizer to soil is not a matter of a one-off application, but you have to reapply this application over the time in order to see the benefits increase year by year. And things are particularly relevant when you read about trials that have lasted decades, which is the case of some of the references provided by the document. The next slide, please. Again, there is a section of this fact sheet that for the categories of benefits provided, you can see insights in the specific benefits provided to soils according to the studies. And in particular, I brought you the example of the soil biology. You can see that the trials that have faced this topic highlight the improvements in enzymatic activity of soils, the biological activity, the increase or the amelioration of the microbial community, and the earthworms activity in soil. And you can have even some quantitative data, again, provided by the studies. All the studies are referenced, so you can have in the last part of the document, of the fact sheet, all the referenced reported studies in order to allow you to give a look. Among these studies, now I wear the clothes of the Italian Composting Association, because among these studies, I just want to bring to your attention, and just a few slides, and then I will give the floor to the other honorable members of the panel. This is a long-term study that was established in Italy next year in Ferrara, in the Po Valley, 35 minutes by train from here. It's a work that has been wanted by CIC, by the Italian Composting Association. It was scientifically coordinated by the University of Bologna, Professor Grigatti. It's a project that started in 2018 and it's still ongoing. So since almost 10 years, we are providing in specific plots in an agricultural foundation called Fondazione per l'Agricoltura Fratelli Navarra, which is an agricultural research center. We are implementing an activity aimed at highlighting both the carbon stock properties of compost and the nutrient effects of nutrients contained into compost to the activity of soil and of the crops. Briefly, the keywords of the experiment of this trial are this one. We are using in different plots different mixtures of specific types of compost. You can see that 3 types of compost we are using. So there is a bio-waste compost coming just from plain composting processes, a compost coming from the double process anaerobic digestion followed by composting, and the 3rd type of compost which is a compost in which even sewage sludge has been used as a feedstock for the production of the fertilizer. We have established in the agronomic path, there are 2 agronomic paths in this experiment, in this trial, a carbon sink path in which we provide these compost year by year, and there is a nutrient path in which we provide compost just 1 every 3 years, and the 2nd and 3rd year we provide just mineral nitrogen fertilizers as a top-up application. Of course, being this an experiment, we have plots in which we do not provide any types of fertilizers and plots in which we provide just chemical fertilizers. And from an agronomic point of view, we are providing, we are running a rotation of soft and durum wheats and maize, depending with the alternation depending on specific situation. For every matrix we provide, we assess different aspects, both agronomic and aspects related to the contamination of the matrices. We analyze compost, of course, but soil as well, the plants that have been grown on the plots, and the crops in terms of yield, nutrients contents, and heavy metals, and so on and so forth. I just give you and finish the two main aspects, the results on the two main aspects we are investigating, which are not the only ones. First of all, of course, the situation about organic matter and carbon. In this graph, you can just compare the situation at the beginning of the trial, so organic carbon content in this soil in 2018, so less than 1.5% carbon content in that soil, and the other plots show you the 2025 situation in the different types of plots, in which you can see, I just highlight the fact that all the plots amended with compost have grown in carbon content. Above all, the carbon sink path, the one in which compost was provided year after year. On average, we have a 35% increase in carbon content in the nutrient path and a 75% increase in carbon content in the carbon sink path. With and this is the average, but as you can see, we have a peak when dealing with the compost deriving from integrated anaerobic and aerobic processes, because probably the fact that the carbon content, the organic matter in that type of compost is particularly stable due to the double process that have undergone the waste. Last but not the least, crop yields. Just focus on the differences. So we can see here the crop yields in the different agronomic pathways in different years, accompanied by the Taki test to assess the statistical difference between different crops. Basically, what I want to highlight is that if in after the first year of application of compost, we had different a ranking in crop yields, because the non-fertilized plots were the lowest in terms of crop yield. Compost plots yields were average, while the chemically fertilized plots were the highest in crop yields. But just after 2 years, the situation was that compost and chemical treated plots had statistically the same crop yields, and this result has been being confirmed year after year. So basically, we are totally replacing the mineral fertilization with compost fertilization. It must be said that we are using huge loads of compost, because we are using the maximum allowed amounts of compost with respect to the available nitrogen content. So this must be said, but the result is this. So basically, I have finished, but just to recap, we are basically claiming to take deeply in consideration compost without any discrimination, even in carbon farming activities, because organic the fertilizer and compost in particular provides benefits that go beyond the simple storage of carbon. Compost and digestate are, again, derived from the diversion from landfills and incinerators of organic waste. So it's worth considering compost in the carbon farming activities that we all want to push forward in the next future. So I have finished, and sorry again for the off-topic intervention. I'm available for questions, but I leave the floor to my colleagues and enjoy.
So maybe before having my slide, just let me introduce myself. I'm Anaïs Slot. I work at the French Livestock Institute. And today I will present you some experience from the French methodology we have developed in the frame of the label bas carbone for the livestock. And also the experience from several projects where we try to go beyond only the carbon aspects, but also to evaluate other it's not my presentation. I'm not Sebastian. So trying to go beyond the only the carbon to assess other aspects of the sustainability. Yes, sorry. Thank you very much. So yes, we are several colleagues working on this aspect, and my colleague Elisabeth Castellan was not available today, so I'm representing her. So yes, we are trying to assess if the low carbon farms are more sustainable than others with different indicators, so environmental, social, and economic indicators. And I will present it then to you. So maybe to start on the label bas carbone, so we have developed a method at the French Livestock Institute to assess the carbon emissions reductions for the livestock farms in the frame of this label bas carbone. That was created by the Ministry for Ecological Transition in 2019. So we developed a methodology to assess the emissions reduction. So the scope of this methodology includes the indirect emissions, so all the outputs that are used on the farm, the direct emissions on the farm, and finally the carbon sequestration. So this method, for the moment, is only for bovine sectors, so dairy and meat and crops as well. And in the future, we will include the sheep and goat farms. So that's the scope for the moment. The calculation method is based on life cycle analysis. So we have a tool that is called Cap2Ware that was developed by the French Livestock Institute to assess the carbon footprint of farms. Great, thank you. So yes, maybe just to give you some context. So yes, agriculture plays a major role in climate change, but I think you already know it. To give you an idea of the number of farms we work with, it's 2,600 livestock farms across Europe in different European projects and French projects as well. And so on these farms, we have 300 farms certified with the label bas carbone. So I started to present you a bit the method. So you have the main guidelines for this method. We propose 40 practices to the farmers. The idea being that the farmers have really flexibility to build carbon action plans that really fit to the farm's context. And that's why we rely on a specific baseline with the carbon audit tool. So again, we really know what for each farm, what are the sources of emissions and how to reduce them. So the tool based on the life cycle analysis per kilogram of live meat or liter of milk. And it's a 4-year project with a first audit, so an initial and final audit, and then we will assess the emissions reductions between these 2 audits, and with technical visits to assess also the implementation of the practices. But to go beyond carbon, so with 3 projects, so live carbon farming, live green sheep, which is also another European project on sheep, obviously, and also a French project for goat, we try to develop a sustainability grid to also assess the other key challenges faced by the farmers. So the economic performance, the working conditions, and also the other environmental indicators such as water quality or biodiversity. So we think that this sustainable transition must address all these indicators. And the goal was to build an easy method to be used by the advisors on the field, so not too much indicators, a method adapted to all ruminant productions, and finally, sustainability evaluation that is linked to this environmental audit we carry out with the tool I've just spoke about. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this method is based on the 3 pillars of sustainability with around 40 indicators collected on farm, so tested on the 2,600 livestock farms. Just the one before, if possible. Yes, perfect. And it's designed to be simple and quick to use. Thank you. And carried out at the farm level with common indicators across the 3 sectors I've presented. So the idea is that we have the pillars, we have issues, and then criteria, and then indicators. So we have, for example, several indicators for the same issue. No weighting, so all the indicators have equal importance in this sustainability grid, and then we convert indicators into scores. So we compare the results of the farm with the national average, and if we have it, the regional average for each indicator. Benchmarks adapted to each country and production system, because we are working with other European countries. So the objective is also to have the references for the other countries. And finally, social pillar mainly assessed using qualitative indicators when speaking with the farmers. Next slide, please. So here you have an example of results from the Live Green Sheep project. Thank you. So with the different impacts, so you will have yes, it's working. No, not at all. Never mind. So we have the pillars, the social pillar with for example, the contribution to employment, territory impact. We have the economic impact, so viability of the farm, dependence to subsidies. And finally, the environmental pillar. The first results from the Live Green Sheep project shows that with the sample of the farms from the project, the farms that perform the best on a carbon aspect are not the more sustainable farms. It means that they are in the average for this sample of farms. So we compare the farm in this sample of farms from the Live Green Sheep project. For the moment, we didn't do it for the average farms in France or in the other countries. So the tool allows this global sustainability evaluation. And what was really important for us was also to have feedback from the advisors, because we speak a lot about collecting data on farms, and it seems simple to just say to the farmer, we need this data and this data, but in fact, it takes a long time. And it has advisors need to be trained to this data collection grid. So for the social data, no difficulty for the advisors, and the farmers were quite interested to talk about it because it changed from the only carbon aspects and all the technical data. So with the social data, they are able to talk also about life balance, for example, between working life and private life. Economic data are more difficult to collect, not necessarily in France, but in other countries, it was more difficult to get this information from the farmers. And the time to collect data, no specific feedback from the advisors. I think it was just my conclusion, but yes. So what are our recommendations from this experience with this project? So the importance, of course, of considering the 3 pillars of sustainability, and also, for example, the additional time that is required for the farmers to have all this data collection, but also to try new practices and to be trained to these new practices. The first results give an overview of the initial situation on farms, but in this project, what we will try to do is to do this data collection again at the end of the project and see if these carbon farming projects improve the sustainability of the farm and the global situation of the farm. And finally, on the advisor's point of view, we really need to find the right balance between the additional time spent by the advisors to collect this very interesting data and the relevance of the sustainability audit. So that's our recommendation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Sebastian Lebel. I work for OSI in Europe. My main market, my main area of focus is Austria. Really quickly, just worked. No, it's not working anymore. I'm so sorry. Just next slide, please. Just a very quick agenda. Who is OSI? Probably most of you haven't heard of us. And what's the project? What's our case study that I want to present to you today? And then we have how are we doing it? And at the end, the allocation dynamics, one of my pet peeves, one of my big topics that I think should get more attention in that kind of discussion. And then finally, the strategic outlook. So who is OSI? OSI is essentially, everybody knows McDonald's, right? McDonald's started in the 50s in the US. The first butchery that supplied McDonald's with minced meat was OSI. Well, I mean, the small version of us. And we kind of grew together, and today OSI provides or supplies around 85% of McDonald's meats, all kinds, all around the world. And we have a quite large presence in Europe, where we not only process for beef patties or chicken products like nuggets and so on, we also are operating several cattle slaughterhouses in several key markets. My main area is Austria. Then we have Poland, Germany, Ukraine, and so on. The big advantage of being a private company and having kind of like this vertically integrated system is we can directly from the farmer, or rather other way around, from the customer, hand down any kind of incentives, any kind of projects that our customers want to do directly down to our farmers, to the suppliers that deliver the animals to us every day. And that direct link enables us to do projects such as the next one. Opa. That one. So we have established around 20 years ago in Poland the project called Cultivate, where today 15,000 farms are enlisted and they supply us with their animals. Around 50% of our meat or our animals we get from those 15,000 farmers. And initially it was a quality control, animal welfare, and some environmental topics in there. And now we redid it, we reworked the whole thing to also include the primary data collection and to kind of future-proof the program. We are currently rolling out the new criteria, the new system. We have, out of those 15,000, already collected primary data on around 100 of them, which might not sound like a lot, but that has already been quite a lot of work to not only kind of streamline the process, but learn of how to properly do it and what kind of data farmers have easily accessible and are able to supply us with, and where do they need the most help. So it's surprisingly hard, and I don't mean this in a mean way, I just didn't expect it to have certain kinds of data available as a farmer, especially if you're small scale, which kind of makes sense, but I was surprised. The main idea is it's a farmer-centric reporting system. So the farmer puts in all of the data, mainly using documents he already has available. So invoices, herd records, documentation from his GAP eco scheme application, and so on. They can upload that, and the MRV tool we're using, Root Global, which I will introduce next slide, they kind of pull all the data they need out of this, right? This is then verified and looked at by the systems of Root Global, and to make sure that the farmer isn't making the calculation better than it necessarily is. For us, the big advantage is that long term we hopefully will be able to supply our customers with ideally carbon reduced product lines, where we finally, or where we will be able to give customers of our customers, meaning me or you, the opportunity to actually pay for a reduced carbon footprint, and the farmer themselves get essentially the opportunity to take part in the carbon farming topic, get to take part in those programs. The incentive structure is quite immediate. They get essentially money per kilogram slaughter weight delivered to us. It is actually, I would say, a significant amount. It's around 1 or 2 zlotys. That's around 25 to 50 cents, somewhere around there. Right now, it's not like that big of a deal because raw material prices, or the price of slaughter weight, has skyrocketed a lot. But it is significant, and it will, and it will keep playing a part in making sure that farmers earn enough through what they're doing. The long-term goal is, as I mentioned, is a results-based payment, right? Outcome and not measures we want to incentivize. And meaning X, we want to incentivize a range of X having as the carbon footprint, and not just no tillage or some other kind of measures implemented. Root Global, the primary function is they do all of the data collection and software story behind the whole thing. They kind of do the hard work that it kind of works smoothly and quickly. And they have several plausibility checks built into the system. I was surprised again as to how much help some farmers actually need as to what kind of data are we asking for. And Root Global is actually doing a lot of how do I say, localization as to making sure that some of the secondary data we have to use, because the information isn't available, is actually relevant to the markets we are working in. The process and Root Global are following all of the required and common guidelines and certifications. So meaning IDF for the allocation on farm level between milk and beef, the ISOs for the allocation themselves and the whole process itself, the calculation itself, and obviously the GHG protocol. The calculation engine and the methodology, the standards, methodische Standards, let's say it in German. It's based on the Cool Farm tool. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. In the livestock sector, it is known. They have the classic cradle to farm gate approach. Scope 1, 2, and 3 are all included. And we get essentially 2 standardized outputs. We get one, the functional units. Well, the standardized outputs meaning the carbon footprint for a kilogram of live weight of a cow or a young bull or a heifer, as well as the FPCM, so the fat and protein corrected milk. There is the standard, and dairies that are also involved in this obviously also get that information. As I mentioned earlier, we have an allocation topic on the slaughterhouse level. This is something that I'm actually, I don't know, passionate about, but that's something that I think we should talk about more. The problem is that at slaughterhouse level, you kind of separate the whole animal into a carcass and all that's left, right? So the hides, the intestines, all of the things that humans don't necessarily want to eat, especially in Europe, in different markets. That is a very different topic. But if I go from an economic standpoint, economic allocation, meaning that which part of, now we have separated the animal into its parts, which part do I want the most, or how do I allocate the emission burden, so to speak, right? And if I go from an economic standpoint, most of the emissions will go to the slaughter weight, to the carcass weight, right? To what we eat, because it has the most value. That kind of doesn't really incentivize all the others also profiting off of the animal, so to speak, to also invest into reducing the carbon footprint. All of the rendering, all of the hide topics, all of the leather ends up in luxury goods, the leather ends up in cars. All of those kind of companies are trying, and I understand, obviously, trying to say we are a side product. We are kind of upcycling something that otherwise gets thrown away. And I can obviously see their argument, but it would make everything a lot easier if all of those customers would kind of carry at least a little bit more of what they're trying to carry in trying to achieve a reduction in emissions. That's like kind of essentially what we're really trying to do, right? And that's already my final slide. I just think that there's like 4 things that are kind of really important. The first one is, how do we tell the story? I think we kind of overlook sometimes that we actually, or I'm really trying to tell what we are doing or what the standards are doing to farmers. And that's hard, right? So maybe we can make it a little easier, and maybe we can focus on actually what do we want to achieve, and not how perfect down to the last kind of decimal number do we want to achieve it. And which kind of goes to the second point. We have to have it easy to implement. It doesn't have to be rocket science, right? We just low tillage or no tillage, menu management, milk efficiency, milk yield, all those kinds of topics are kind of basic and have been known for 30 years. We don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel here, which again is kind of in the third point. It has to be, I want to do something. I have a lot of customers of us that also want to do something, and it feels like everybody's kind of waiting for the starting pistol to be shot. That everything is set now. Okay, now I can actually plan and do what we want to do. But it feels everybody's waiting for something, and I'm not really sure kind of what it is. Because we really have to start reducing today, or mitigating, or insetting, offsetting, however you want to call it. The whole thing is not waiting for us to kind of finalize our last calculation. And I'm really always trying to push towards, we can't measure it perfectly now, that's fine. We know, like, I'm pretty sure that most of the measures that will be having the huge impacts are already known and already being implemented in regenerative agriculture and so on. But we have to start, like, at least, like, maybe hopefully today, ideally 10 years ago or something, maybe even further back. Thank you for your attention.
Before the slide goes up, apologies if this was a bit of a bumpy one. We lost our session lead and moderator, probably another panelist as well along the way. So it's quite a heroic effort. We did it. So I was meant to talk more about how can that transition be financed, a bit less related to what Alberto showed about compost, but definitely very linked to what Anais showed about transitioning and looking at the impact in a more holistic way that goes beyond simply carbon, and I'll touch upon that, but as well as what Sebastian said in terms of like the processor and the role that those actors can play in developing incentives. And the incentive structure, whether it's kind of an investment one, is what I'm gonna talk about today. But before I do so, I will frame a bit the project where this has been developed. So I'm working at Climate Kick, where my role is to indeed think about designing innovative financial solutions to regenerate landscape and relocalizing food system. And a great project that I have the pleasure to be involved in, and I see also a representative from both Climate Kick, but also the Irish government in the room, is our deep demonstration in Ireland. Deep demonstration is a methodology Climate Kick has developed, but what is fundamentally underpinning it is the vision set by the Irish government in the Food Vision 2030, which it's not too far now, but when it was done, it was a bit further, and it sets some targets. Especially, I think the most important one is 25% reduction by 2030, with the overall ambition for climate neutrality. And what Climate Kick has done with the DAFM, the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine in the Irish government, and different stakeholders, is about developing that shared vision, co-designing a portfolio of intervention that, if you want to address systemic change, it will not happen project by project, but with a portfolio of it. And then once you have them, then start doing it. And similar to what you were saying, it's good to learn by doing and test different things, whether they're technology or different approaches to the transition. So fundamentally, linked to what Anais showed, what we use as a framework for our holistic impact that we want to achieve in the dairy sector, which is where the kind of farm system I'm focusing today, is built on commons for return. I hope some of you already are familiar with the model. If you're not, it's highly recommended framework for a holistic version of impact, because it's not only in the environment bit, where it's not just about carbon, but biodiversity is in it, water is in it, and other aspects of it, like soil health. But it has three different components, three different returns, starting from the economic one, and you were showing that as well, the social one, also already part of it, and then Commonland quite cleverly has included the inspirational one, which is very much, you have there some example, but it's about your outlook, how positively you are thinking about the future, which is a key part of transition on farm, especially if we ask farmers to invest. So they need to believe that the future is going to be brighter, at least not as bad. And this is the framework we use. So what my role is, I'm not an agronomist. All the good stuff that were done before, I got other people involved, and again, some of these are in the room. But then my point is, how can we use innovative finance to crowd in capital into that transition? And I think there are 4 key objectives that my sorts of thinking is driven by. So first of all, we need to incentivize the farmers. They need to see that as a viable and attractive proposition. And we need to incentivize not 1, not 2, not 5, but at least hundreds, even in that learning by doing experiments. Secondly, we need to demonstrate that what we are doing in the framework of carbon farming can deliver the holistic impact I was referring to. Whether it's Anais' model, the full return, doesn't really matter. It cannot be just about carbon. Thirdly, we need to shift the risk associated to outcome payments. Too often, people talk about outcome payments as if this is the holy grail for farmer. It is not. They get paid if they deliver the outcome. What if they've done everything correct and the outcome don't materialize? What if, because of issues maybe within the MRV, the outcome payment, only a fraction of it goes to the farmer and the rest is sucked by lots of intermediary. So that's a key aspect of it. And fourth, partially related to that, we need to build that market. It doesn't exist today. Carbon, some people say it's already quite a functioning market. I could argue maybe after over a drink of it, but we need to build that market. And that market will only come if we try things and work towards that. So with that in mind, this is my final bit, which I would like to present the model that we would like to test. So the structure was called social impact bonds, development impact bonds. They've done humanitarian impact bonds. Is a classic results-based finance structure. However, in agriculture, we'll take a bit of a different approach, and I'm going to try to go through this step by step. So first of all, the impact bonds in the middle is not a financial vehicle, is 2 outcome-based contracts. One contract informs how the private capital, the blue at the top, is deployed initially. So that's the first contract, possibly with a bank. The second contract is with these guys here, the outcome payer. So the second contract will say you commit contractually if certain outcome materialize to pay for those outcomes at the pre-agreed price. So the impact bonds is made of 2 contracts. Let's go now step by step on how it works. So firstly, the investor, as I said, it could be a bank. BNP Paribas, if you know, is a bank that has a dedicated team working on this type of product. So it's not so innovative nowadays. They will provide money to the impact bonds as a loan. And that money will cover 2 main things. There is also, of course, an organization that implement the projects, but the costs are mostly 2. First, whatever intervention we want to support the farmer with. We are talking about methane reduction, whether it could be slurry additives, whether it could be the arable things. Possibly, we could even include compost to be more inclusive, Alberto. But ultimately, money that will help farmers to cover the cost of whatever they need to do. As I said, there is going to be an intermediary in the middle to implement the project. Let's forget about this. And then also money into, I called it the data hub, but it's ultimately an MRV protocol, like going and measuring and whatever outcomes you're after, you need to go, whether it's a survey to the farmer, whether it's sampling the soil. I'm trying to be quite open now so that maybe that relates to most of the cases you can think of. So the money is there, the project is on. Well done. Second step is we need baselining. So the first thing happening is this function is going to go and measure the sorts of metrics that you are interested in monitoring. And this measurement, it will happen, of course, at the beginning to baseline. at the middle, like interim measurement, and then of course at the end of the project. So this is a recurrent function, at least 3 times in a project that could last maybe 5 years. What's happening is, of course, that if you measure, then there is a data flow. And the color, I hope they're quite different and enough different. But then there is this data flow. And the data are held there. Could be a dashboard. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. But the reason why this is important is because of the function number 4. So results-based finance only works if the evaluator is completely external to the project, is completely independent, and is tasked to come and check that the data you have are actually real. So you can see that also as an auditing function. But what they do is they go and check the data and say, well, they are good, they're legit. And once these guys say this is legit, they create a report that is sent to the outcome payer, in which they say, we can show you that the data that says this or that or blah, 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 it's all legit. So you are now contractually obliged to pay for those outcomes. That money, as I said, is taken and given back, in this case, to a bank, let's say, or whoever has funded upfront the intervention. At the end of the project, if you have been good, the outcome funding, the outcome payments will be sufficient to pay back the bank with also a little return, is a loan. But the interesting part is that if you have not been good enough, the farmers are not going to lose. It's a loan. So when loans don't get paid, there is default. And that's what happened. So if the intervention we have designed is not going to deliver enough outcomes, the outcome payments will be less than the loan. The risk is taken by the investor. The investors always take risk in exchange of a return. So this is how the financing works. One thing I wanted to say is that because is this holistic view of impact, and Anais already mentioned, but I just want to say kind of the approach we take in Ireland. So in dairy, methane is the main thing, but we have other important aspects, specifically to the Irish context. So for example, water quality, you mentioned it as well, is definitely a key one. Biodiversity and space for nature is definitely another key factor. Additionally, the social aspects and the inspirational performances. So this is our ambition. This is the product we're working on. It's the end of my presentation, and I just shot it, I guess. Excellent. So as I said, we were quite improvised, and maybe Alberto, you want to come back here? To be fair, I don't know. I think if there are some questions and stuff, we can just take it from there. Maybe can we use that, maybe? That microphone? So maybe. Oh. Oh, lovely. Okay, so should we just shout, maybe? Please, you start.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a question for the last speaker. And you talked about the investor being likely to be banks. I'm afraid I didn't really hear who the outcome payer was likely to be. It'd be interesting to have a little bit more information about them and why they're happy to lose money.
So the starting point, as I was saying, is starting with the processors and the value chain. So we have processors, and in the value chain, there is interest as scope 3 reduction, as we heard today. Now, you rightly pointed out, those are not the whole outcomes we want to market. So the ambition and the conversation is that whether it's the social ones, those might be more philanthropic actors. Last conversation I had is a foundation that is very focused on mental health. And they were saying, we would love to do mental health in agriculture. They've never done it. But to say that, of course, the social aspects are less commercial. But when it comes to water quality, for example, there are plenty of evidence and other models. I think the one I could recommend looking at is Lens, the landscape. They have brought a utility company, and water is also associated to flood risks. So I think water is an outcome that has been already commercialized. While biodiversity, maybe that I give an example of Italy, Etifor is the company doing this type of work. Space of nature is something very localized, so you can perhaps mobilize family businesses and entities that operate in the same area that have an interest in supporting the community around it. So it's not an easy one, but there are cases that have done it, so I wonder, why should we not do it? On the point of losing money, I think the systemic risk aspects and how these things are fundamentally threatening, I would say, business models, I think is a key aspect. We've heard about insurance, stop insuring. So if you're serious about still living in your village, maybe, and you are just below a few prone to floods farms, I think there is some serious existential questions that I think you should be asking yourself. And so that systemic risk, commercial viability, I think it's what ultimately drives investment in prevention. And absolutely not everyone is receptive to that message, but I think it's not losing money. It's, if anything, protecting your revenue in 20 years. Yeah, you go first, but then you and you.
Thank you. My question is to any of you who may want to pick it up. How do you measure and calculate the carbon impact, or perhaps also the methane impact of grazing? And do you have any insights of grazing with regards to carbon farming and also beyond carbon projects?
So yes, we evaluate methane. So enteric methane and also the methane due to the effluent on the farm. So when you have grazing, we will assess the difference between having slurry stored in the farm and the grazing outside. So we take this into account and we propose practices to reduce methane, even if for the moment we do not propose, for example, additives. They are not included in the tools for the moment. But yes, we look at the ingestions of the cows, and depending on the diet of the cows that is collected on the farm and the evolution of this diet all across the year, we are able to assess the methane, enteric methane emissions, in addition to the methane due to the slurry and manure and so on. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but. Oh, so you mean having like sniffers or green feed to monitor directly? Oh, for carbon sequestration. We have several projects to, well, as what it was presented in the plenary session, we also have projects to do samples and try to have a map of the soils in France and the carbon sequestration potential for the different soils. and especially for the grasslands, because sometimes it's a bit difficult to get this information for grasslands. We have it for crops, but temporary grasslands, permanent grasslands, it's more difficult. And in the tool, for the moment, we have we have an average for each type of surface, but we are working with a model that is much more precise, including, for example, the management of your grasslands, depending on if it's grazing, if you do hay, these kind of things, how many cuts, and so on. And we will be able indeed to assess carbon sequestration much more precisely than what we do actually. That's it.
Perhaps just from a conversation, yes, is that carbon sequestration in grassland, especially permanent one, is something that has been overlooked a bit from the public and CRCF, but also the private sector standard and greenhouse gas protocol, for example. So it seems that it's coming, but at the moment there is not yet a framework for that specific carbon to then be included in other things. So I think it's like livestock now. I think those things that will come in as soon as there will be more clarity on like, how you sample it, how you measure it, then possibly there would be more uptake, I would say. But at the moment, it's something not so well developed.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. Fabrizio, I'm coming from University of Pisa, and I'm a PhD student on agroforestry for sustainable animal production. Just to have two demands. One is, what is the instrument that you use to assess the methane emission in your studies? And what do you think about the implementation of agroforestry system, in particular the use of tree for fodder production? That is something that is under study in a few years, that it can be a solution for low emission and give resilient forage for farmer. Thank you.
Nice, I feel like you're the expert here.
I'm not, but so regarding the methane emissions, so we use an equation that was developed by INRAE. So based on the ingestions, the type of animals, the weight, and so on. So that basically what we use in the tool, and we are also so we have a French project that is called Methane 2030, and in this project we have include different experimental farms in France to assess enteric methane emissions with green feeds, sniffers, laser methane detectors, and so on, and try to have an overview to compare the results we have with the different tools. So that's one of the first objectives of the project, and try also to to test the equations. And for example, we have this LMD that is used to assess the fluxes of methane, but it's not possible at the moment to convert it into gram per day. It's very difficult. We don't know if in this project we will find the equation to make the link between these two units, but we are working on it. And the other aspect of this project, we have several aspects in this project, but something else is also to test different additives, so Elgay, Bovaer, etc., on the experimental farms of the French Livestock Institute and the Chambers of Agriculture. So that's for the methane part. And for the agroforestry, what we see at the moment is that it's a very small part of the livestock farmers who decide to plant trees on the farms. To give you an examples, in the live carbon farming project, we had like 2% of the farmers who decided to plant trees. So that's a very small amount, and we need to investigate further on this aspect. And I think you also mentioned it for the further use of the agroforestry. So for this, we have another experimental farm with a specific aspect. You see how we can complement the diet of the cows, for example, during the summer with agroforestry, so with fodder coming from the trees. In fact, it's very interesting because we see that when there are drought, the fodder coming from the trees can be like what we yes, like the additional part that can really help the farmers to overcome this period of drought. But for the moment, it's only experimental aspects. And in this farm, it was for dairy cows.
Is there something maybe you could say about methane, if it is something that you look at also from a compost perspective, or no comment? Okay, I try to include them. We just go first to him.
I think at least 3 speakers mentioned the challenge in gathering data, the increased administrative pressure and finding the balance of how much more data is worth the effort. How are you going to organize this better for the future? What's your vision on that? Because the more granular the data we want for our models, which will help the outcomes to be more precise, the more effort it is going to cost farmers to supply that data. It's fragmented at the moment. I work for a company that has dairy robots at 45,000 farms. A lot of data is generated there, but how do we match this into common systems where a farmer doesn't just have to gather its input from tens of different sources and then give it to OSI, but also to their dairy processor, which may want something which is just a bit different. How are we going to organize that?
I think that's a very good question. I would love to be able to be in a position to have a perfect answer. I think we should we are all looking for the same thing. We're just trying to read different outcomes out of the same data, so to speak. And this is maybe wishful thinking, but it always seemed very intuitively easy for me, well, not easy, but obvious, to have a centralized data bank kind of on an European level, maybe, where the farmer gets, how do I say, that the farm level data gets collected in a standardized way. So everything is comparable. And whoever needs the data, to however granular, either pays the individual farmer for that data or access to that data, or gets access through some, participating in programs or whatever. So I think something like this is a huge undertaking, I understand. But there's so many MRV tools, and everybody, all of them want to sell you all of the great things they can do. And if this sounded sarcastic, I wasn't supposed to be. I'm sure that, a lot of innovation is happening. But the basics of the data and the low-hanging fruits are most of the time very easily available. Most of the time, as I mentioned earlier, it surprised me how hard some data points are to kind of then actually get.
I'll say something, but also to give time to all of you to think about a question around compost. So I'm watching for you. But to say that impact bond structure that we are exploring, I think one of the main reasons why we decided to look at that instead of, for example, a carbon project, is this idea of pooling outcomes. And therefore going on the field once, measure for multiple use cases, hold the data in one place, and having a one-to-many relationship. And I think this comes from the realization that MRV costs are too high. That's the classic sentence. But there is too much focus on reducing the cost of MRV because that's the only use cases you can see. So you start optimizing everything for example, carbon. While we should start thinking, if this is the cost, how much more money can I make with that sorts of sets of data? And so it's like addressing, instead of like a company wants to grow, they can decide to cut the cost or increase the revenue. I think that's the approach that you can take when you anyway are going to the field and are sending someone to audit and do a farming survey. So ask more questions if those data points might serve other purposes. Compost question? Ah, my friend. Okay. Compost question. I love you.
I will ask my compost question first. Bokashi, is there any value in Bokashi in advantages over composting and keeping the air in? And secondly, then with your research into livestock and grazing particularly, and recent research coming out of Ireland and now Wageningen on reduction of methane from grazing animals, how close are we to making livestock the good guys, not the bad guys?
Okay, open. Okay. I reply first. Unfortunately, Bokashi has not an industrial perspective, so I could not answer from my experience. It looks interesting in terms of being a procedure, process that is very conservative in terms of the organic matter containing the residues that I use to produce the Bokashi compost. But unfortunately, I don't have an industrial answer to give you on this product. Maybe before we were discussing about methane and measurement, a contribution that I can give to you in terms of suggestion. I have talked to you about the benefits of composting soils, but I have as well told you about the fact that compost is produced from the recycling of waste. So in my imagination, it would be fine to be able to bring in a carbon farming activity the burden of emissions saved by the production of compost through the different processes. For example, compost produced from integrated processes, anaerobic, anaerobic. So be able to give to the compost that you provide to soil even the emission savings that you have provided because you have produced biogas, biomethane, because you have saved the emissions from the landfill that would have otherwise occurred if organic waste would have left in the landfill or being burned in an incinerator. And all these aspects can of course be measured in the process, because the process occurs in a closed reactors, and so you can more or less measure anything, almost anything. And so it is a suggestion, it is an idea.
And on that, I think it's interesting, not only anaerobic digestion for biogas, but now, for example, with renewable policy coming into play, then that could become also through ammonia stripping and scrubbing technology, then can become a way to also replace chemical fertilizer. And so that thing you said is almost double. I think perhaps on the other point also, how to make the livestock guys the good guys. Maybe we can just go around and call it a day. I think we saved the panel, so thank you very much. Maybe I'll start and then I'll pass. Something that our project in Ireland has shown, and I think that's we're working on, is that a key aspect is indeed the narrative one and the story we build. So we can develop a fancy marketing campaign, and I think like Dare to Dairy was one of the slogan that in the project was mentioned, and some other cool stuff. But I think ultimately the point that I think in Ireland is quite clear is that it's a massive economic development assets for a country like Ireland. You cannot fix climate crisis or agriculture by kind of diminishing the value. It's almost something you should capitalize on, because it's it benefits so many people, it supports the economy. So I think if we can find ways to work with dairy farmer, but without necessarily diminishing their value, as if the climate strategy is diminishing the value of that sector, I think it's going to be difficult. But if you can find ways even to perhaps reduce the number of cows, for example, but still protecting, for example, profitability of the business, I think that, to me, that at least to me, that's the balance I understand working in this area. So it's all about protecting the viability of the business while accepting that some intervention might be needed. But I think that's a balance that can be struck. I don't know what, and then we can go.
For me, the topic of cattle being the good guys, essentially, it all comes down to what you measure and how you measure it. I never really understood why a mother-calf system extensively on the high alpines, so to speak, is the worst thing in the world. So it's just, you know, which numbers do you want to pull and what do you want to look at? Tomorrow we have a new framework and suddenly everything is different. I don't know. I don't understand why organic is such a bad thing from a pure carbon footprint point of view. I mean, I understand carbon footprint is an efficiency indicator. That's kind of basically it. Low input, high output, low input, low output, kind of however you kind of manage resources is what you get in the end. So I think if you want to raise livestock, whichever ones, doesn't really matter. There is going to be emissions, but we're not doing it because they look pretty, but because we want to eat something, and all the other kind of additionalities that they provide. I'm from Austria. Our ski slopes are open. Our alpine regions are open because of grazing. So there is so much more to it than just they produce emissions, and that's a bad thing. So it's always very hard for me to not sound super biased coming from the cattle industry, right? And there's kind of this tendency to point towards pork and chicken and say they are the bad guys because we just eat grass and everything's fine. There's obviously a lot to do better and to improve on. But I really don't like the whole conversation of cattle being the bad guys or the good guys or whatever. It's just, if you want to eat milk or consume milk or eat meat, cattle has to at some point exist. And that's kind of, yeah, my point.
Is there any other question or?
I just wanted to comment your idea with data sharing and open data and stuff. I think there is not much farmer here, but a lot of farmers are concerned about sharing all the data and what that is used for in the end against the farmer. So just be realistic here. And you also have like AI Act and Data Act and things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm extremely sorry. Apologies for missing that. I just want to say that I think sharing the data is one step, but then is the controlled access the other part. So a lot of the times data are taken for a purpose, and then there is completely lack of accountability on what else is happening. So I think that idea of that middle ground is also to make sure that the access is controlled, and it could be for approval, the Flemish ILVO with DJust Connect, or in Finland, Data Space Europe is all about the governance around for specific purposes, sending a request, having to approve, and as soon as through APIs, as soon as that purpose is kind of done, you kind of lose access. So to be fair, this to me is more of a governance and social agreement type of issue. It is not really a tech one, or yeah, it's not too difficult if there is the willpower to allow that sort of actual data ownership instead of yeah, they own the data, but they cannot really do anything about it.
I agree 100%. The data should be owned by the farmers and they should have 100% agency over it. I personally think that I would rather give my data to the European Commission and some servers ideally located in Europe, rather than some private MRV that at some point might get bought up by a huge conglomerate and does with that data whatever they want, or just storing the data that my data on some AWS server somewhere. I think I agree 100%, but since so many kind of, how do I say, participants of the value chain are trying to access the same thing, making this possible, I think, would increase, so to speak, the monetary value of sharing my data by a lot for the farmer. But to be honest, I'm not an expert on this. That was just essentially my idea of why isn't there like a centralized database, a warehouse where I can kind of request access and the farmer can say, yes, here you go. And I can incentivize him for that. And we can go on a way together, on a journey together to reduce his emissions. That's kind of where I'm coming from. The data is, yeah. Any more questions?
I have nothing more to say. Maybe. Okay.
Okay. Let's start first with the role of animals in the food system. If you want to make the food system more sustainable, circularity is an important part, and without circularity, without animals, you can never reach full circularity. So animals, like you say, they are an essential element of our food system. The question that I was having for you is that I noticed from your monitoring system is that you currently reward the farmers for kilograms per slaughter meat. And then at the same time you say, okay, maybe it makes sense to also have carbon credits assigned to, or carbon emissions assigned to the leather, to whatever other side products come off of it. Is there something like a dialogue going on using the whole animal in carbon accounting, or is it at this moment currently only directed to the meat sector? And that's for me an honest question, open question, and is there an opportunity to start that dialogue?
So there is right now, they reopened the guidelines discussion on European Commission level as to how to allocate side products, byproducts, and main products on slaughterhouse level. So everybody is, well, everybody apart from the cattle industry, meaning the meat sector, is, you know, very small, very tiny. I don't, my products are side products. I don't deserve any emissions. And from a meat point of view, that kind of, I understand the economic argument, obviously, but it kind of seems a little counter to what we're trying to achieve as like a society sector, wherever you want to go with this. We want to reduce emissions on farm level, and I need as many parties involved as possible to finance the whole thing. We've heard today several times that we need so much more money that there is in the system available. And if the car building companies, VWs, BMW, and whoever starts to have to kind of incentivize farmers for reducing their emissions because they need the leather to reach certain thresholds, that's great. I will be able to, at some point, hopefully provide them with those carbon reduced leather pieces, right? So that's where we are trying to kind of get everybody involved and not allow anybody of our customers to kind of sneak away and move themselves out of the picture. But right now there is exactly that discussion happening for what kind of allocation methodology to use on slaughterhouse level.
Thank you. It's really for you there, the question. So would it be helpful to have sort of an independent third party to come in to almost knock your heads together and say that it needs to be 80% to this, 10% to that, 3% to the other? Is that the bit that's missing?
I think there's good luck. I would love if somebody could knock our heads together, so to speak, and go with mass balance. So whatever thing weighs, that's the amount of emission it kind of gets attributed to it. But as I mentioned, I personally, I don't know how to solve this, because it's like one sector against many different, not against, but yeah, well, we have different interests, obviously, but it's kind of an against. And I understand the counter argument, obviously, because of the economic point, but it would make everything a lot easier if we went with mass balance, or the gold standard would be biophysical. That's very hard to do and way out of what we are trying to achieve. Mass balance is a great second kind of solution to this. Yeah, well, thank you very much for thank you very much for your time. I hope you learned something today. I learned something. I learned quite a lot. Have a good day.